The project kicked off probably in December when we got the RFP from Pride. They were looking for somebody to help them build the Pride in London 2018 app.
The fact that we're going for gold standard accessibility this year, that was a real focus for us, is to make sure that our app was as simple and easy to use as possible.
We know that we want to deliver an app that everybody can use. So it's extremely important to take special care at every part of the development process, such as screen readers need to be read clearly, and the icons need to be universally recognizable, as well as colors used, they have to be of high contrast.
Anyone with any visual impairments or just difficulty using digital devices could actually use the app, understand it, and plan their own Pride for themselves.
React Native allowed us to write our app with a familiar interface and a familiar API, but allowed us to build the kind of the native experiences that we really wanted to build for the application.
The Pride Labs was an opportunity to get everybody in the same room on a Saturday, rapidly ideate, have devs and designers pairing together, and also our Pride stakeholders could come along as well.
Having an event like a Pride Lab where we had different departments at Pride, some directors come and see the work we were doing, was a great catalyst to get people excited and involved. A great use of a day, having sort of cross-functional teams work together on different problems. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure everyone that came from Pride did as well.
Yeah, to make the project as open as possible, we did most of the stuff on open platforms. We hosted the project on a public Trello board, the code on public Github, communication on a public Slack channel.
Yeah, that we could invite anyone to join that was interested. We advertised the project in the communities that Red Badger were involved in as well, primarily the React community, which we host and are heavily involved in. We called for volunteers. There were a lot of enthusiastic volunteers and they've been involved since.
We took the approach of testing as and when is necessary, sometimes testing in and around the office, and sometimes we go down on the street and test with people just out and about, and that gave us a really good sense of validating the things that we thought would work here in the office.
On the emotional side of things, we want them to feel delightful. We want the design to even surprise users along the way of discovering new events. Even going through lengths such as having micro interactions within the app. When you favorite an event, for example, you can see a little rainbow pass over the shape of the heart. And that itself, I hope, can surprise and delight the users. Yeah.
This project's meant a lot to me because I'm really passionate about the social value initiative that we set up about a year and a half ago. And this has actually just been like an amazing working proof of concept.
I've loved working with Red Badger. When I came in and met you guys, I could just feel the sort of energy and passion that Red Badger had for the project, and you guys have proven yourselves to be, you know, a well-oiled machine, getting some really awesome creative work out, but you know, working to a schedule and deadlines, and everyone at Pride is super excited and happy with what we've done.
Hi. Hi everyone, welcome to the React Meetup, July edition. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you for putting up with our cheesy marketing video for the Pride app. But you can obviously tell there's a bit of a Pride theme this time because the Pride Festival just happened and loads of people from this meetup helped to make sure that the digital side of Pride was a success. So as you saw, like, we were super proud to build the app for this year, but I don't know if people in the room would remember earlier this year, I stood up and asked for volunteers from this very group, and a bunch of people I mean, loads of people put their hand up and said they wanted to help. Some of them worked with us, thank you, Sonia, we're on the Pride app, but also loads of people worked on the Pride website, which wasn't mentioned on here, which is a real success and looks really, really awesome. So I just wanted to kick off today by saying like thank you to everyone here for like getting involved in the project. It's a really, really awesome thing. Thanks. So our first session for today is to talk about that project. We get feedback on this meetup all the time saying we want to hear more about React Native, we want to learn more about just kind of like real-world examples and real-world apps. So perfect example, we thought to talk a little bit about why React Native was a good choice for the Pride app this year, and sort of tick that box for real-world examples of React Native. So being, at least for us at Red Badger, a group of mostly JavaScript developers, obviously React Native is kind of an obvious choice for native development, but we're definitely great believers in picking the right tool for the job. So you really need to understand, obviously, what are the requirements of this application, what do we really need to do to make it a success, and how do we choose the technology that's gonna run it. So we needed to evaluate that. So to play the part of hopefully happy product owner, can you please welcome Christoph Hamilton from Pride in London.
Hopefully my mic works, cool. I have to reiterate immediately, thank you so much to everyone that's helped. I probably don't even know all the people here that have done little bits of code here and there to help the app, but I'm definitely a very happy product owner and very excited to have a little bit of a Britney Spears moment with this microphone. So that's a big tick on my bucket list to begin with. But for those of you, maybe you don't know a lot about Pride, so I'm sort of here, I guess, to set the scene of where we were at when we met Red Badger and what we're about. So this is only my second year at Pride in London, so I just started in 2016. It's a pretty big deal in the LGBT+ community. It is the biggest Pride in the whole of the UK, and I'm super proud to live in London, one of the most diverse cities in the world, and that definitely applies to the LGBT+ community as well. So Pride is an event. About 1 million people come for Pride, so there's a footprint over the Pride weekend of about 1 million people. So that's a lot of people that potentially look at our digital ecosystem. And I'm sort of head of digital at Pride, so I look after anything to do with the internet, basically. So basically, Pride as an organization, we're really focused on improving the lives and supporting everyone in the LGBT+ community. And that doesn't just mean on the day itself, it means all year round. So a lot of people think Pride is about the parade, but actually there's a whole load of other stuff goes on. So we have, a Pride's Got Talent contest to support, young artists and musicians. We've got a Pride festival which runs for weeks before, which the app was really important for, showcasing events of the community. And then we also have the parade itself. And all year round, if there's things like, atrocities in Chechnya happen, people at Pride sort of mobilize, and a lot of the protests you see, Pride in London actually has something to do with. So we're also the only volunteer-led Pride in the UK. So that means that, Pride is free for everyone that attends. So, I'm going to Brighton Pride at the weekend, but I had to pay, I don't know, £30 for a ticket to see Britney, hence the mic reference. And, those are businesses, whereas, Pride, we're very focused on making sure that, accessible also means what people can afford, not just, the communities that they belong to. So we're very keen to keep that free. So there's about 150 volunteers that work all year round, so I'm a core volunteer. Still going to continue with the website. If anyone's interested, we're still looking for people to help. So, and then on the day, we have about 1,200 stewards that actually you see lining up the parade. So everyone works for free. Everyone is doing it sort of out the goodness of their heart. So, having a real passion for the cause is really important to us. For my team, we've not been around for that long, and Pride doesn't have a huge history of having great digital products. So I guess what I'm trying to do is sort of innovate from the inside and look at Pride, even though we're split into a lot of different departments, like you would expect a normal company. We've got a marketing team, a comms team, a fundraising team, all these different things you would expect in a sort of corporate. but we all do it because we really care about the community. But I'm trying to look at it from a bird's eye view and innovate. So the app was very central to what can we do to help lots of different teams. Last year, in my first year, I just had the app to do and worked with another agency. One of the big problems we faced actually was that after we'd finished, it got sort of caught in a lot of bureaucracy and red tape. So something that was really important to us was actually to be much more open about what we were doing, to actually own the code and own the design and sort of play a bigger part in it so that we could continue building and iterating and learning from what we'd done, rather than what we had to do with Red Badger this year basically was start fresh, which is very stressful, let me tell you. So this year, sort of just to give you an idea of what the digital team do, we did Parade Applications website, a donations platform. Some people in this room helped with the new events website and the website that we're currently still working on, the app, and we did a chatbot. So there's a lot of stuff going on at Pride to try and improve what we do digitally, and the app played a huge role in that. So I basically went out in November, because the previous app was done in 9 weeks, so I decided to go out much more early to people to start the process. So I went out in November looking for someone to help. And I guess the brief of what I gave in the RFP was that what was really important to us was the Pride Festival had been extended. So previously it was a 2-week festival before Pride, which meant there were a more limited number of events, so you didn't need amazing filtering to be able to see everything. But this year it had been extended to 4 weeks, so that obviously made it much more complex, much more events, much more going on, and we really wanted to help people discover and plan what they wanted to do. So, you know, Pride is not just about showing people that aren't part of the LGBT plus community, you know, what we're about and that we want equal rights and that we deserve that. It's also about, there's a lot going on within our community. You'll have seen that there was a protest at Pride from people in the LGBT community that have a problem with another part of the community. So there's a lot for us of focusing on learning about each other and what we're about, which the festival and the app played a huge part in. And I think the biggest challenge probably was that on the parade weekend, for anything happening on that day, there was no Wi-Fi anywhere in central London. So anything that you build, any information that you have, needs to be really clear, really accessible and useful for someone that has no internet connection. In terms of a team, so what I was looking for was people that would listen to our problems and help us solve them, not just come up with a pre-packaged solution that they'd already thought of. We were looking for people that sort of understood that we're all volunteers. So my day job is I'm a UX designer in an agency. So everything that I do for Pride, all the stuff that we delivered, that was on top of a full-time job, along with everyone else on my team. So, you know, it's quite difficult if you're on a project and you want an answer from your product owner or your project manager and you've got to wait. So I was looking for people that could sort of deal with that. And we, like I said, we wanted a long-term solution. So we don't want to keep doing the same thing every year. We want to improve. We want to actually innovate and make Pride, you know, a digital organization that people respect and that look up to look at what they're doing, especially in the sort of non-profit and charity sector. And I think the main thing, like you saw in the video, what I said about Red Badger was I was really looking for passion. And I think when you're working on a project for free, you know, you've just had a hard day at work, you've had a crap time, your client at work or whatever is being really mean, and you just want to go home and like chill out on the sofa or whatever. And you know, when you have that passion for a cause like Pride, it really keeps you going. And the work that I've got to do and that I hope that some of you guys have got to do is much more exciting than what you get to do in your day job, and you have much more freedom and you actually feel that you're making a real difference. And I really felt that from the Red Badger guys. In terms of the tech stuff, which I'm sure you're more interested about, because this is a sort of tech meetup, we really wanted, you know, to have robust, stable code. We really want to grow the use. We see the app as being a huge deal for us in the future in terms of, you know, how Pride actually operates on the day. We need to sort out the whole internet connection thing, but that's another thing to do. So we really want to have a really stable, robust app that we can build on year. So we were looking for people that had a tried and tested solution. We didn't know it was going to be React. I wasn't looking for a particular code base, but that was really important to us, to have it work on as many devices as possible. So, you know, we do want everyone in the community, whether they're from a low income or a high income, to be able to use it. You know, a lot of app developers out there want to use the latest fancy features on an iPhone 10, but not a lot of people can afford that. You know, 1 in 10 homeless people are LGBT. So, you know, there's a lot that we want to do to make what we do accessible to everyone and make sure that everyone can be included. And I guess the last thing is we really wanted it to be, like I said in the video, really simple and user tested, and people that had a sort of focus on that craft and making sure that, you know, from both a technical perspective tested, you know, stress tested to work, but also, you know, from just actually testing it with real people, which we never had a chance to do before. But I'll hand you back to Robbie, who's going to tell you all the nerdy stuff that I'm sure you're more interested in.
That's me.
But thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chris. So yeah, cheers, Chris. That's like a really good overview of obviously what Pride's about, but what the requirements were for this application, and like, you know, how we could really choose the technology behind it. I think there's some really interesting sort of technical challenges and also like process challenges for a project like this. So one of the big things that was important for Pride was accessibility. You know, whatever we chose needed to work well with screen readers and things like that, and we needed to have control over that and the ability to test it nicely. We needed obviously quite a bold design. It's Pride, like it needs to look good and it needs to look kind of fancy and not stock in many ways. Obviously needs to work on both platforms. You know, we had a quite an even split between iOS and Android coming to Pride last year that we still needed to support. And then from process point of view, like I mentioned, a lot of the people in this room or at Red Badger are JavaScript engineers, let's face it, and whilst we're all about choosing the right technology, you've got to kind of adapt to the limitations of time and you know, your deadlines, right? And on top of that, this was mostly voluntary time that everybody's working in. You can't really rely on everybody working 9 to 5 all the time to make estimates for meeting that deadline. It needs to be quick, it needs to be frictionless, and basically we can't spend too long working on 2 separate code bases for 2 separate platforms. And as Chris, I'm sure, will testify to, deadlines were relatively short, and we got close and made a bit nervous. Another thing that was also interesting is offline usage. We needed offline capability. It's mayhem at Pride, and the cell structure is really overwhelmed. There's plenty of people coming from outside the UK who don't have data plans. They need to be able to look at the app and from that point on kind of invisibly have downloaded all of the data and use it over and over again from that point. So we don't really have time today to go into loads of the technical details of the project. I think if everyone's interested in like digging into the code base for this app, then give us a shout and let us know, and we can probably put a talk together to sort of look at some of the more interesting bits of the code. But React Native, for all of these points that I just listed, seemed like an obvious choice, and it worked very well for us. So it allowed us, most importantly, to iterate fast and iterate just on our own schedule, in bedrooms, whatever, like doing working on the code base whenever we could, and hammer out code that works on both those iOS and Android platforms as quickly as possible. But alongside of that, I think that the thing that's most good about React Native is, unlike a lot of these cross-platform frameworks, it allowed us to inject a little bit of the platform-specific code to really sort of tailor to an experience that an Android user is going to expect, an iOS user is going to expect, to really get the feel of a native app and not some kind of weird hybrid app or web-wrapped app. Another good thing was accessibility support. I'll come on to it a little bit later, but accessibility support in React Native was decent. Like, it wasn't perfect, but it was decent, and it did serve our needs, and it allowed us to kind of really quite quickly and easily in the JSX make sure that the screen readers could read out the elements on the page, allowed us to quite easily handle responsive design, so we could support landscape or whatever, for all those kind of accessibility points that we wanted to hit. But you might have read, I mean, most of you have got to have read that Airbnb blog, right, about dropping React Native. there's been a lot of publicity right now about React Native not being perfect, and we definitely didn't find it perfect. If I can read my writing, so like in some cases, styling was a little bit of an issue. One of the things I like the best about React Native and during this project was the speed of iteration, especially of the look and feel. But there are a few places where you'd spend hours just getting like fonts to render like 1 pixel higher or lower, just getting stuff to look just right. In some cases, things like shadows, gradients, blur views, actually really difficult to get working inside of React Native. Maybe it's just difficult on native platforms in general. We also found that some of the libraries that we used in React Native had kind of varying degrees of quality. And I think the reason for that must be that unlike libraries in JavaScript for the web, you publish something to NPM, it's got to hook into the native bridges on both platforms, which are obviously completely different, and have a much more complex setup process as a result to hook into those native bridges. And so in general, I think publishing a library for React Native is just much more difficult. So we did hit some issues with, for example, React Native maps. We had some crashes on Android after we released, I think to do with a certain type of pinch to zoom that we were doing that was kind of hard to track down. So there were little kind of edges here and there that we hit that I don't think you'd really hit quite as often if you're just pulling libraries from NPM for a web project. Maybe that's the maturity of the platform. I think a lot of it is just to do with how hard it is to publish a solid library for React Native. And like I said, not perfect accessibility. We did find quite a lot of variation between iOS and Android in how much you could do accessibility-wise. That's probably mostly a complaint for those platforms in particular. But it was quite tricky in some places. iOS works just perfectly how we wanted it. The screen reader said just what we wanted. Android wouldn't. And in some cases, absolutely the other way around. So we did spend quite a lot of time wrestling with screen readers. We've got a blog on our site about some of the challenges that we had. Nowhere near as long as the Airbnb one, like a couple of paragraphs. But the sort of the baseline of that blog is that we definitely don't think we could have met the deadline and come up with something as high quality as we did without React Native. It just wouldn't have happened. It absolutely enabled us to deliver this thing on time and to our kind of level of standards, which wouldn't have happened otherwise. So we thought it was a fantastic tool. It's a great example of a real-world application of React Native. So the last thing I want to leave you with, until maybe we do some kind of deep dive, is the fact that this whole code base was open source, obviously in the spirit of pride. So if anybody is trying to learn React or React Native, or they want a reference to have a look at of a real-world application, currently it's on Red Badger Pride London app, and you can see the whole app open source and a bunch of documentation. We will quite soon move this into a Pride in London organization, so that will change to Pride London app. We just need to sort out a few things with like CI and billing and that kind of stuff, because it needs to be free. But yeah, if you're interested, absolutely go and have a look, and I hope everyone finds that useful as a point of reference. And finally, obviously, I hope you enjoyed that kind of overview and background that Chris gave. There's still work to be done on the website, and if anybody's interested in working on that, then give us a shout and we can pass you on. And later this year, hopefully we'll be able to pick up this code base once again, and we won't have to start from scratch. We can really start hammering out some awesome features onto this code base. That might be us, it might be you guys, it might be anybody, but we want to leave this in a place where maybe at the end of this year, start of next year, you can pick it right back up and start building an awesome app for next year. So thank you so much to Chris for coming along. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so our next speaker, if he wants to come and get set up, wherever he is, there he is. So iOS and Android, if you know React Native, are obvious sort of build targets, cheers, that you can go to. and you probably heard of it, but a lot of people might not realize that you can compile for Windows with React Native. Probably a much more less mature kind of system, but it is absolutely possible. So to talk all about how that's done, but also the process issues with building a React Native app for Windows, please welcome Chris George.
Hey guys. Oh, sorry. Back. Sorry. Hi guys, welcome. I thought we should launch with an obligatory Windows joke. So I'm Chris, I'm the Senior Vice President of Product at SOMO. We're a digital product accelerator, and we build products across a wide range of verticals and sectors, mainly full stack application development for web and mobile. But I'm going to have a chat to you tonight about an application we've been building for a bank. Built in React Native and targeting Windows, as was previously alluded to. Terms of NDA, etc., means I can't actually say who the bank is or show you any of the UI, so I'm going to talk through the process. I can say that we work with quite a few of the Red Badger guys in there, so people who are close to them may have an idea of what we're talking about. So initially when we started talking to the bank was in early 2016. And the original brief was basically around reimagining a number of in-branch journeys and translating those to tablet, which when we first heard the brief was really, really exciting. Kind of right in our sweet spot, I guess, of application development and user interface design. So the whole team was quite excited at the beginning of the brief, and then towards the end they made the point that the target device was Windows 8. And at that point my kind of inner meme voice that talks to me said this, my negative meme voice, but then my kind of positive meme guy straight away was like, JavaScript. Maybe we can do this with JavaScript. So we'd been working with React.js at SOMO since around 2015. We'd already had a fair bit of experience at this point around building web applications with React.js. And sort of mobile-first web applications with React.js, but we traditionally native-wise, we'd been an iOS and Android native shop, but sort of around this time, we'd sorted to explore some of the use cases where React Native made sense, and this was around April 2016. And at this point, I want to be really clear, and this was kind of alluded to in the last talk as well, that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. There's plenty of use cases for applications where great teams of Swift developers and Kotlin developers are probably a more appropriate solution, but we felt for sort of component-based applications where there's a large element of sort of data I/O and managing state, that React Native was becoming an increasingly viable alternative. And the fact that we're not a Windows shop at all and had no Windows experience sort of made the decision a little bit easier. So rewinding, it's kind of 101, you guys will all know this. What is React Native? It's a framework for building native apps using React. It's built on top of React.js, targets mobile devices, phones and tablets, Android, iOS. What about Windows? And a lot of you are probably sat there, like I was at the time, saying, well, what about Windows? But the role of Windows and tablets in enterprise, particularly in financial services, where we see a fair bit of traction and do a fair bit of work, is still the most dominant OS. There's a plethora of legacy Windows in enterprise environments, but beyond that, I think there's a long tail of hardware upgrade contracts. So quite often in banks, they've already gone into agreements with hardware providers and have contracts in place that span several years. So making the switch to Android or iOS is quite often not a potential option for them. Tablets are the most popular format for technology use for in-branch experience, and that's something that we're seeing more and more. That's a trend that's definitely increasing. And then, as I alluded to earlier in the brief, this move to shoulder-to-shoulder collaboration for staff-to-staff interactions, but also staff-to-customer interactions is becoming increasingly powerful, right? particularly in kind of more entrenched incumbent banks who are starting to see a lot of competition from fintech, so the Monzos, the Starlings, the Atoms, the guys that we talk about every day who are doing cool stuff in branch and doing really, really cool stuff on device. So we started to do a lot of research around the Universal Windows platform. The key for it is basically this. It's a common app platform to develop for Windows applications. We'll target all of the device families that we see across the top. Targets every Windows 10 device essentially, and the output at the end of it theoretically is a single application package that you can run on any of these devices in theory. It's not always as straightforward as that. So in terms of React Native plugin for UWP, as I said, this was kind of April 2016. It existed, but it was only about 3 months old at that point. Developed and maintained by Microsoft, by a very, very small team at Microsoft. We'll come on to that. And the role of the framework was essentially to add support solely for the Windows 10 SDK. It was a little bit backwards compatible in that at that point in time you could deploy React Native Windows apps on the Pro or Enterprise versions of Windows 7 or Windows 8 as well. We actually built our first proof of concept that ended up in 3 branches on Windows 8.1, and we've ported it to Windows 10 fairly recently. So everything that we're doing now is for UWP. Excuse me. So this is kind of as of yesterday, just a screen grab of the GitHub repository for React Native Windows at the moment. Over 100 releases, a fairly active community in a lot of ways, and a fairly engaged community. So as I said, at the time when we took the project on, it was quite a big leap because the actual framework was not as advanced as we see here, or not as mature as we see here. So team shape-wise, as I said earlier, we're not like a Windows shop or a .NET shop. We don't have C# developers sat around doing nothing. So that was the first challenge for us in terms of what does the team makeup look like to build this product. Fairly standard across the top in terms of product leadership, technical lead, product owner, TA, Scrum Master, back-end. So the back-end is kind of fairly bank standard in that it's mainly all Java 8. There's a MuleSoft integration layer that allows us to build kind of cool presentation layer stuff on top of their really old services. Old services being 50-year-old mainframes buried under Canary Wharf somewhere running COBOL. Outside of that is the UXD function, and the core bit really that we're talking about today is that front-end presentation layer element of the team and what is their skill set makeup. So we were quite lucky in terms of when we started to put the team together, that the lead for the team was a very, very, very highly skilled JavaScript developer who did have some Windows background. He's actually here tonight. He'll answer any of the difficult questions at the end. But outside of that, the team that we've built around that, of the 4 React developers that we have at the moment, 2 of them had no prior Windows experience at all, and are essentially just pure JavaScript React developers who have kind of learnt along the way. There is definitely an element of needing to dip down a level into the Windows layer, but it's manageable if you sort of balance that load across the team, I guess. So it hasn't really been a huge issue for us in terms of building the team and expanding the team. Challenges have been commensurate, I should say. So the main one's been the lack of the maturity around the plugin. When we started development in 2016, a lot of stuff didn't exist. A lot of stuff that we needed to do, we couldn't do. There was a smaller community for React Native Windows at that point in time. I would argue that they were very, very engaged and willing to contribute back. The key challenge we faced really was the lack of features available for Windows at that time. A lot of our journeys were predicated around the use of the native camera, and being able to redefine a lot of these in-branch journeys needed camera, which didn't exist. As I touched on briefly, we had a lack of ready development expertise on the Windows front, but that was kind of mitigated just by the way that React Native works. The UI challenges, I think, have been one of our biggest challenges and ongoing challenges. And so when we stop talking about iOS and Android and we move into that Windows device ecosystem, we run into a whole load of different issues that we have, particularly around resolution scaling. So the potential for a user to just go in and say they want to see the UI at 200% and not being able to stop that happening, basically. So all of the design work that we've done has to be almost responsive in thought, but in a native environment. And that's probably been one of the most challenging things we've faced on the front end, I would say. And then sort of inherent within the bank itself is software restrictions within the bank, which are getting better as we move along. But an example of that is you need Visual Studio 2017, which we didn't have at that point in time. One sec. Oh, there we go. Collaborating with Microsoft. So Eric Rosell is a guy that we've dealt with a lot at Microsoft. Keeper of bees, grower of beard, father of Bo Henry. So I initially assumed that he just lived in Hackney. That wasn't actually the case. He's in Seattle, in America. And they've been really, really useful in terms of having a contact on tap that we can reach out to. He's in charge of the whole Microsoft React team, which is 3 people. But he's been super, super responsive in terms of what we need and some of the challenges that we face. We've worked with him to overcome. The next challenge for us is how do we start contributing that stuff back to the community within the confines of the bank, which is something that we're working on at the moment. So I'll touch really, really quickly on the technical side of stuff in terms of what we've built from a native module point of view. We did a native SVG renderer based on XAML's implementation, video player mappings, native camera module, which I already touched on, and error logging capture to Splunk. And then kind of the technology infrastructure that we've built around that has been pretty interesting, and we've had a fair bit of freedom in terms of what the bank allows. Again. So technical choices, we've just implemented last week JS Bundle, which allows us to do over-the-air updates of the application, which is obviously super important when you're in branch and staff don't know how to update an application themselves, so that's happening automatically through JS Bundle at the moment. All the code base is written in TypeScript. We use the artsy.net relay fork, so I'm sure lots of you guys are pretty familiar with the work that artsy.net are doing in the React space, really, really inspiring. Something that we make use of a lot, and then that relay, our relay instance is communicating to a GraphQL endpoint. So in terms of where we are with the product, as I said, we've been in development now probably for about 18 months. We've got a trial running in 4 branches in the UK. We've just launched in Palo Alto in California. And we've just pretty much doubled the size of the team to start focusing on a release for Singapore, which is earmarked for November. But in the best spirit of Agile, it's kind of November at this point in time, and we'll see how we go. So that's where we are with the application at the moment. Yeah, really, really exciting roadmap. Great to work with Microsoft. As I say, it's quite outside of our comfort zone as a development shop to build a Windows application in such a complex matrix environment as the bank, but it's been a lot of fun, and we've had a lot of success. So thank you. And I'd just like to take a moment as well to say thank you very much for Red Badger for having us tonight, and also Facebook for hosting. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Chris. Are there any questions for Chris? I think you might have got away with it. Thanks so much, Chris. Okay, so I think after 2 talks, we'll take a quick break if you want to rehydrate, get some pizza. So we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Thanks.
If you wanna leave, I'm ready. We've come too far to give up who we are.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you're feeling hydrated and full of pizza. Okay, so we'll dive straight into our next talk. MobX. A lot of you probably use MobX, and you might be big fans. And all of us, I think, when we're building our applications, we've slowly cottoned on to the fact that there's these good patterns around there. Obviously, immutable data. If you're a fan of MobX, then reactive programming is probably one of those things on your list. And if you use MobX, you might well have tried out MobX State Tree for the sort of immutable data kind of pleasantries. But you might have played with it, you might not have it in production. So to talk about all of the trials and tribulations of using MobX State Tree in production, please welcome Max Gallo.
Thank you. Welcome everybody. I'm going to talk about MobX State Tree. For the one that have no idea about what I'm talking about state management system. So your application has a state. You are bored of using React.this.set state. So this is one of the solutions out there. But let me first introduce myself. My name is Max. I'm principal engineer at DAZN. DAZN is a live sports streaming company. We're based here in London, and we're live in like 6 countries right now at the moment. You can find me on Twitter. Yes, there is an underscore before my name, or on maxgallo.io. Enough with the presentation. Let's go with the plan. So I'm going to go with a MobX intro and a MobX State Tree overview, because I want all of you at the same speed on what I'm going to talk next. And then we're going to see how to set up the reactive project, which are the choices that you need to make when you set up a reactive project. And then I'm going to give you a couple of takeaways that you can potentially go home and start building something on top of them. First question, what's the difference between MobX and MobX State Tree? So if MobX is the engine, MobX State Tree is the car. So MobX State Tree is powered by MobX. Let's start with MobX first, the engine of the car. It has a couple of nice ideas behind it. One of the core ideas is that it helps you dividing and decoupling your view from your business logic. That's a very important part. And then it uses reactive paradigms in a way that it has gentle learning curve, so you can start, you're going to hear little by little words like observer, observables, without being overwhelmed with something like RxJS or something that is much more heavy on those concepts. And then it's unopinionated. What does that mean? It means that it can be used in different ways. So there is no like a right or a wrong way to use it. MobX pillars. There are 3 pillars that are really at the core of MobX. The first one is observable state. So far, your application state has been treated in different way. For example, Redux will suggest you to use an immutable on application state. In this case, for MobX, we're going to talk about a mutable application state, and that's unobservable. Then we have computed values. Computed values are observable themselves, but also they are automatically derived values. So we start with the application state, then we derive some value starting from the application state, and those are the computed values. What are we going to do with all these observables? We're going to connect them with something that reacts to those changes, to those observables. And then we have reactions. Reactions are side effect. We have plenty of side effect. One side effect could be updating a React component, or maybe you want a fully custom side effect for doing something else. But we're going to see that in the example next. There is a little bit of code, so bear with me, last talk of the night. So, again, on the right here, observable state, computed values, reaction. Same thing that I showed you before. On the code, let's have a look at the class here. So class is ESX class, so nothing really fancy. Car park. Cars is the first property of the object, is an observable. We're using decorators here, but MobX allows you to not use decorators if your project doesn't support them. And that's a plain object. So, sorry, that's a plain array, an empty array. We're not doing anything fancy here. We're just defining one array. And that's our observable state. So our state is an array. Seems easy so far. Computed, second property is how many Ferrari. It's a getter. So since I have an array of cars, I want to make sure that I know how many Ferraris do I own. So in that case, we added the computed decorators before. And that is for explaining that that's a computed value, so that's a derived value based on the mutable application state, which is just an array, which is just cars. And in that case, I'm just getting these cars.filter.isFerrari.length. So no magic, I'm just checking how many Ferraris do I have. And then we go to a simple, very simple React component. It's called React Car Park View, and these decorators here is observer. It's gonna teach the React component to render itself every time an observable changes. What does that mean? The observer there controls every kind of observables within the render function of that component. If an observable within the render function changes or mutates, that component will get re-rendered. As you can see here, that's pretty standard stuff, but the important part is that we are rendering at line 24 here, and then we are doing a set timeout at the last two lines with a couple of more cars. And if you try that in your browser or in your IDE, you will find out that that will trigger a re-rendering. So this is the concept. These are the concept of MobX. Nothing really magic going on, but there are three important pillars that we need to consider when we start talking about MobX State Tree. MobX State Tree, the first big difference with MobX is that this time is opinionated, so it provides you a clear way of, it explains you how to do things. And then it's ready to use. With MobX, you have multiple ways of how to do stuff and things. With MobX State Tree, just this is how to do it, go, start. It's powered by MobX, and it relies on the concept of trees, sometimes called stores. So if I use tree or stores, I'm talking about the same thing. Why a tree? What is a tree? A tree is the part that holds your business logic. And a tree looks like this. Let's start with the definition first. On the left, so we have a model, again, mutable, observable state. You will start seeing again the MobX concept going on. This is probably the biggest difference. It contains type information, so it's not only about just an array, but it also provides information about an array of what. And also could contain other trees, and then you start seeing why it's a tree, because a tree could contain more tree, and actually one tree is the composition, it's not a composition, is made of all the tree connected between each other. Then we have something called views. A lot of naming, but views are still again MobX computer values, just a different names. And then we have actions. Actions are the only way to update the model. So observable model, views, which are computer properties, and actions. With the actions, we update the model. We can see here on the right some examples. So this is the syntax. You import types from MobX State Tree. You have a car store. Type the name of this store is car, and then you define whatever property you need. In this case, I'm defining one property, which is a string. Type name, and then I define one view, which is a getter again, because computer values are 99% of the time getter, which is a Ferrari, same stuff that you saw before. But more interesting, in this case, we have another store that contains, this time, car store, because again, car park is the name of the store. And then it has array, it has cars, which is a property that is an array of car stores. So we are linking this store with another store. And then we have one action. One action, it's simply called add car. And what it does simply self.cars.push. So you don't have to learn, yes, there is a little bit of new syntax, but we are using array, we're using object. So for updating those kind of things, the syntax is the syntax that you already know. When we instantiate one object in one store in MobX State Tree with the create method, we are passing the initial value. In that case, the initial value is an object containing cars, which has an object inside an array with one item only. And that's very interesting, because you may be aware that cars, defined here, is an array of car store, but I'm not passing any car store, I'm passing a simple object. So in this case, what MobX State Tree is doing behind the scene is casting that object and is checking at runtime if what you're passing here is compatible with the definition of car. And that could be really powerful. As you can see at the end, I'm calling add car, which is just the action that we define here. So with add car, with the action, I'm updating my model. That's fine, that's cool. We learned a little bit about MobX State Tree, but how I'm going to connect stores with React components. That's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to spend much time on it. This is very familiar with the Redux word. There is a provider from the MobX React package. package that you use to wrap your application, and you can pass different things to it, like, for example, a shop store or a navigation store. You can pass whatever you need. You don't need to pass a store. You can pass configuration if you want. And then how I'm going to use those stores within my component. I'm going to do that with the inject decorator. So this is actually the only part where we are linking our business logic with our view. And that's really important because that help us with the possibility of working with the business logic completely disconnected from the view. We are going to access shop through the props, so normal standard React stuff. So this.props.shop, and once I got shop, I can access whatever I need to. But stores are much more than what I already showed you, and we don't have time to go into all the details, but important to mention a couple of features, just such as mutable. So we saw that your application state is mutable, but at the same time it's kind of immutable, because every time we mutate the state, MobX State Tree generates an immutable, generates a snapshot. So you can use those snapshots for storing them on the local storage, to sending them back to the server for other purposes, or for time traveling, as we are used from the Redux word. Then we have composition. It's really important. You can compose different tree. And we have lifecycle method, like after create, before destroy, something that you would expect from such a part of your application. And then we have dependency injection. Dependency injection is a very old concept that is applied here because sometimes we need to inject something within the store. And this is an example of the dependency injection. We're going to start from the bottom here. So car park store.create is always the same syntax. We are passing the initial state, again, one array with cars. The second parameters that we are passing is another object that is the environment. The environment is the part that we are injecting in the store. You can use this for injecting, for example, services or logs, or something that you may want to replace while you are testing, or whatever you think is suitable, because the idea of the dependency injection, I'm not going to go through why you need to do dependency injection, but you can do this, and it's pretty cool. You can inject whatever you want. This is a JavaScript object. And in that case, how do I access from within the store something that I injected? So getHenv is the syntax I'm going to use. getHenv is imported from MobX State Tree again. getHenv self, it uses self to avoid any kind of confusion with this. So it uses self, so no one is writing this anymore. getElf self.getCars from backend. And this is the part that I'm passing here. So in this way, I can inject something, whatever I need, into one store. And we'll see that later, how that could be powerful. One important thing I was about to miss is that the environment, so what I'm passing, is shared per tree. So if you have one tree, each single leaf, each single branch on the tree is sharing the same environment. But when we did designing a project, okay, so I know a little bit more about MobX. I know how MobX State Tree works, which are the decisions I need to make when I set up one project. First one, you need to choose if you want to have a project with one root store or multiple root stores. And we're going to see what does that mean. And then store communication. So far, we covered the communication between the view and the business logic, but we didn't really cover if two stores need to communicate between each other. And we're going to see that. Shape your tree, one root store. So in that case, your application, everything is contained into a single root store. So provider here at the top, we saw that before from the example. In this case, I'm passing a single root store. Inside this store, I have properties that link to other stores, like navigation store, car park store, language store, whatever you need. And this tree could be as big as you need. The important part is that the root store is one. And which are the pros and the cons? So first one, it's easy to perform action on the wall state of your application. Imagine you need to get a snapshot of your app. If you have one tree, you do one snapshot and boom, that's done. You have the wall snapshot of your app. Same thing for destroy or creation. It's easy to manage one item instead of multiple. And then you have a unique environment for the dependency injection. So if I'm injecting my login system into my root store, every child here, every child store, it's still within the same tree. So everyone will be able to access what I'm injecting. So the environment is shared within this tree. And we have a cons that with this architecture, sometimes you will start creating tightly coupled stores. What does that mean? It means that if you have this kind of structure and from navigation store you want to access car park store, you will start doing something. Okay, let's go up, let's go down, and we will see that in the next slide in 2 to 3 slides why this could be dangerous. Instead, on the other face, we have multiple root store. So provider, again, this time I'm not passing one store, I'm passing multiple store. For example, navigation, car park, same stores. The big pro is that you can start reason by domain. So you can have one store responsible of a single domain, for example, for navigation or translation or whatever you need to. But your code is pretty much divided into that topic and that domain only. The problem with this approach is that, on the contrary, if you need to get a snapshot of the whole application, right now your whole application is not one tree, it's made up multiple trees. So you need to get a snapshot of the first tree, the snapshot of the second, the snapshot of the third one, you need to store them. So there is some work that needs to be done. And same for the environment and for the dependency injection. So if I inject something here on the navigation store, this car store is not gonna use it. It can't use it since it's a different store. So I need to inject every single time. So we saw the pros and cons on one store versus multiple store, and now we're going to talk about stores communication, how they talk between each other. There are 3 ways. Well, there are slightly more ways, but these are the 3 we can start with. So default approach, actions wrapper, and dependency injection. Let's start with the first one. Default approach. Default approach is the one that we started to see at the beginning with one root store. So it's you can find this one in all the examples of MobX State Tree. And basically, the problem I was talking about, you can see, for example, this is one root store that has a couple of properties in the model. One is a navigation store, another one is page store. So you can start seeing root store, navigation store, page store, they are store child. And in this case, I need to show the login form. This is one action in my page store. And while showing my login form, I need to change the path of the URL, maybe. And so I need to call the navigation store action. In this case, I'm doing get parent. Get parent is available here. Again, MobX State Tree. Get parent self.navstore.setPath. As you can see, starting from here, I'm doing this, get parent, then I'm going down, and then I'm calling an action here. If this round trip is one level nested, it's fine, everyone is happy. But if we start doing this for the whole application and doing get parent, children, get parent, it can get really, really messy, and all your stores will start knowing the whole structure of the application. That means that it's going to be impossible to refactor or even to update. Actions wrapper. This is a classic example. For example, I'm going to go again with the login one. When you log in, usually you need to do a bunch of stuff. You need to present a UI, you need to change the URL, you need to do something else. So actions wrapper is a technique to have a single store that is a store wrapper, so that you can call just, this is actions wrapper store, One action is login. So from within the app, every time you need to do a login, you call action webinstore.login. And all the knowledge is inside here. This store knows about the alt store login, the page store login, navigation store login. So it knows all the things that needs to be done for performing a proper login. Again, this is fine in this example. These are 50 lines of code. It looks awesome. But in a fully sized project or in a medium-sized project as well, this file could be the center of the knowledge of your app. This file could be 300 lines of JavaScript or 500, and it's going to be unreadable. And so use it, but pay attention to it when it gets to scale your project. Then we have dependency injection. As I showed you before, we can inject anything because I'm injecting an object, basically. So in this case, let's start again from the bottom. And I'm initializing a region store. So I'm doing region store.create, and I'm obtaining a region store. And then I'm creating a navigation store. Navigation store is created, again, same syntax. I'm passing, this is the initial state. Second parameter, I'm passing the store as a dependency injection. What's going on? So I'm creating one store, and I'm passing that store to another one as a dependency injection. So we don't have really tightly coupled stores because that's dependency injection. I'm explicitly saying what I'm dependent of. And in that case, how I'm going to use it. So for example, the region store has one property only in the model, which is region, which is a string, which is UK as the default. And the navigation store instead has a URL path. And in our URL path, we want to show the region 2 letters code at the beginning of the path because product says that. And so in this case, we're going to do, this is a getter, again, a computed values from MobX. And we're going to do getEnv self.region store, which is the one that we are passing here from dependency injection .region. And in this case, we are adding /self path. So if we console log this one, this is going to be UK/login. And this is nice. You can use it for both actions and views. In this case, I'm using it inside a view, but you can use it for actions as well. And you just need to make sure that you don't mess up at the beginning when you initialize all your stores, because you may have problem about circular dependencies. Stores A depends on stores B depends on C, and you know the drill. Almost done. Takeaways, a couple of things that you can start reason about. So the most important one is that the quote, anything that can be derived from the application state should be derived automatically. So every time you are about to add something to your application state, ask yourself, can I create a computed value that does the same job? The answer is 80% of the time, yes. So do that instead of creating a new property in the application state, because you have to maintain manually that property. Computation values, computed values are not maintained by you, are maintained by MobX, and it's pretty efficient in doing that. MobX help you decoupling your code. Again, this is very important. If you remember, the inject decorator is the only connection point between view and business logic. MobX State Tree provides a structure. As we saw, it gives you action, it gives you the type of the application state, and it gives you the type casting while we are instantiating object. And then MobX and MobX State Tree are an easy way to introduce people to reactive concepts. So if you are in a team and you want to start to explore some reactive concept, and you don't want to go fully on RxJS or Extreme or other solution, it's perfectly fine. You can start introducing something like this. People will start recognizing concepts such as observables, observers, and it's going to be a much gentle learning curve for the whole team. And last but not least, reactivity could be addictive. So once you start reasoning in a way that your component is automatically re-rendering itself, if you change your model, you basically lose the connection, and it feels like magic at the beginning, but then you got addicted to it. And the first time you work on another project that doesn't have that kind of connection, you feel, oh, do I really have to do that again? The action, reacting manually and updating. So reactivity could be addictive. That's it. Thank you very much. You can find the talk on GitHub, all the slides, and you can find me on Twitter. And I think I got some time for questions, or maybe not. Thank you very much.
Cool, thank you so much, Max. Any questions? I think you must have explained it very well. Thank you very much, Max.
Thank you.
Okay, that is all we got time for this evening. I got a few thank yous to dish out as usual. Obviously, thank you to our speakers for some really high-quality talks today, myself not included. It's much, much appreciated. And thank you to Facebook for hosting us, because it's a fantastic venue, it's perfect, and they do an amazing job every time. Also, thanks to some of our partner guests for attending tonight. So Ada's List, Founders and Coders, Code Bar, and Node Girls. We really appreciate you coming along. We are always looking for speakers for this event. So if you have like a 20-minute talk, lightning talk, around the topics of React or interesting frameworks that work well with it, React Native, best practices and design patterns, we would love to hear what you've got to say. So give us a shout at hello at react.london, and we'll get you up here. It's always appreciated. Finally, I was going to show a slide for this, but if you are interested in Reactive Conf in Prague coming up, and you are looking for tickets, just because you're lovely people, we have a coupon code for you, redbadger_2018, capital R, capital B, will get you 10% off tickets to Reactive London in Prague. So if you want to go, drop that in. Finally, our next event will be our React Summer Social on the 16th of August. It is at Flinders. Is that right? Finches, thank you. Finches near Old Street on the 16th. There'll be some lightning talks and drinks, so please come along on the 16th. So until then, thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you there.